I want to start us off on an ordinary afternoon. Is it too loud? Is it too loud? No? Okay, good. Okay. So I'm running an identity program at a mid-sized organization. And on this particular afternoon, I'm doing a spot audit of an employee that was terminated just a few months ago. And there's no incident or audit, like investigation. It's really just a spot audit. It's really just me checking off a box. So I find no issues with the audit. Everybody was offboarded. Every access was offboarded. Everything was good. So spot on, put a bow on it, we're ready to go. Then I happened to have a conversation with a coworker of the person who was terminated. And she told me that the individual was using an application every week that wasn't on my list. I didn't have this application on my list. And not on the IDP, not in the the application register. It was nowhere to be found. And so, of course, I'm thinking, well, what do you mean? And does this person continue to have access to this application? And so the problem with that was that everybody passed the audit. There was no issues with the audit. Everybody did their job, okay? But this application was missed. And so, of course, I'm thinking about this, and there's a question I can't answer. Are there other applications like this? This was quite a revelation, because I mean, I was completely baffled that this application existed. And so I guess as I dug into this story more, that eventually ended my CISO career at my employer. And what I'm about to tell you guys is what I found out next, okay? And so I think by now you guys know that I work for Unixi and that this is a sponsored session. But this is not a pitch, okay? Because this is a story that I'm going to tell you about what I discovered as a customer, okay? So this was before I joined Unixi. I was a customer, I was spending my own budget, and I was vetting vendors like everybody else. I was asking all the hard questions, and so I had no incentive to give anybody a break here. And what I'm going to tell you at the end of this is I'm going to share some numbers with you, and I'm also going to give you some tasks to complete so you can vet your own environment. And as you do that, you don't need to talk to me. You don't need to talk to anybody from Unixi. You can do it on your own, okay? So what I had built was a pretty solid IAM program. This is pretty generic. I couldn't share my actual employer's IAM program, but it was modeled after this. We had Entra ID, we had SAML, we had conditional access. We really had everything. And we took a lot of, I guess, pride in the identity program we had. We did a lot of hard work. And we passed audits with it. We got SOC 2. I used to present it to our vendors, our vendors, and as well as our leadership. And we got a lot of support for the IDP program we had. And if you had asked me how certain are you that all your applications are managed by your IDP, I would have said very. And I had a dashboard to prove it. The problem is that the dashboard could only tell me what it was able to see. So then I had to figure out, I had to figure out, was this an outlier or was this a category? Okay? And so this audit that I did for the terminated employee, it led me down the path or conclusion that I only at least had one application that wasn't covered by the IDP. And I'm skeptical enough to think that if there's one application, there's going to be more applications. But I really had no way of figuring this out. I couldn't look into the IDP to find the answer, so I had to go looking for a solution. So that's when I ended up doing a POV with a company called Unixi. I'd never heard of them before, okay? And, but what was unique about them is that they existed at the browser layer. And the browser layer is where all the authentication was happening. So I needed to see what was happening at the browser layer. And so I ran a report. So I got the first report, 30 days in, 300 employees identified in the report, and 200 applications. So 200 applications equaled about the number of applications we had in our IDP. So within 30 days, managed applications matched our unmanaged applications, okay? And so what was in that unmanaged lot? Logistics portals that contained employee and customer addresses, financial and vendor payment portals, data sharing services, and business intelligence tools. And these are all systems that ran our business, not one-offs. And so this report told me one organization, one workforce, same 30 days, two equal populations of applications, one visible to my IDP and one completely invisible to my IDP. And so I kept looking. So the report also told me all the usernames that had been used in the last 30 days. And to my surprise, 20% of my users were using shared accounts. 1 in 5 people out of 300 were using shared accounts. Okay, and these are not one-offs or some niche tools. 20% of these people were logging into real applications that I mentioned, logistics portals and vendor portals and so on. Some were used by 3 people, some were used by 5, and some even by 10, okay? And every one of them was password only. And all of this activity was completely invisible to my IDP, okay? So then something occurred to me. So these are all username and password applications. They have shared accounts. I didn't know about them. The IDP didn't know about them. That means we never rotated those passwords. So that list I was bragging about at the beginning of the talk, when I said, oh yeah, we checked off every checkbox on our list, it didn't mean anything at this point because we were checking off the list, but people were leaving out the door with credentials. We had no idea. So of course, you kind of take stock of this and you go, well, did I screw up? But how could we have screwed up? We had no idea these applications existed in our environment. Zero. No visibility, no tool, right? So I guess from my perspective, there was nothing in our environment that was feeding us that telemetry. Nothing was telling us that somebody logged into a portal with a shared account. No alert was going to the IDP. Nothing was going to the SIM. Why? Because there was no sensor at the browser. There was nothing at the browser that was capturing the login event and telling us about it, right? So it really wasn't actually ignorance on our, well, maybe partially ignorance, but we had no way of fixing that problem. So then, what it did was it forced me to acknowledge that this was not a one-off. This was a category of applications, okay? And so I think that the industry today says that 1 in 5 applications exist outside of your IDP. Your organization is completely oblivious to the majority of the applications that are being used in your environment today. So, and some of these applications are actually critical to your organization. So then, of course, the question is, why does this gap exist, right? And as IT professionals, we look inward and go, okay, well, it's got to be our fault. We screwed up. I thought about this long and hard, okay? So the first reason is SSO tax, okay? A lot of applications today put SAML integration behind a premier tier, okay? So you have to pay extra to get SAML support. So that makes it economically irrational for a lot of people to use SAML, okay? The second is the logistics portals and business tools that I told you guys about. Those services simply architecturally don't support SSO. It's just not possible, okay? And then finally, there's the adoption, the rate of adoption versus the rate of governance. Adoption simply outruns governance because today, shadow SaaS and shadow AI happens through urgency, a credit card, and an approval, and off you go. And this happens all the time, right? And by the time you find out about this tool, generally, if you do, you've got tons of data in that tool already. So, I remember I said it's not a pitch, but this is a commercial break. And the reason this is a commercial break is because from my previous role, have to give credit where credit is due, okay? Because what Unixi did was it identified this huge gap in my environment that we were completely oblivious to, okay? And so Unixi's first step was discovery. And so that data I shared with you was just discovery data. What I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to stop by booth 5921, and they're going to give you a demo of the entire solution. There's a lot more to this solution than what is on this board and what I could tell you about in this brief time. Okay, so commercial's over. Sorry. All right, so I had a mental model and it got challenged, okay? Because my mental model was that identity governance lived at the IDP. I was wrong. It doesn't. And wrong because the perimeter isn't at the IDP. So we throw around the term or the saying, identity is the new perimeter. We say that all the time. Well, so if we're going to say that, let's take that a step further. Because that means that perimeter today exists for the most part at the browser. Because that's where all the authentication happens for federated, unfederated, and unknown applications. Right? So, I think the name of the talk was why I went from a customer CISO to a vendor CISO. So why did I do that? Why did I switch over? After 25 years of being in the buyer seat and being skeptical of all the pitches that came my way, and really pushing a lot of vendors to the point where they would stop reading the slides and question them at every level, I was actually pretty good at it. So I'll tell you why this is important. Because the report I got, that I told you guys about, it completely changed my view of how I saw the condition I was dealing with. And honestly, I've been managing this condition under the sort of surface and not knowing about it. Sorry guys, I got to speed this up a little bit. Okay, because we always assume that governance flows through enrollment. And if you enroll it, you govern it. If you don't enroll it, you don't govern it. Well, the problem is enrollment is completely unrealistic today. The pace at which SaaS and tools are adopted into your environment, enrollment is a no-go. It's not how you're going to win this. And so this is not a tooling problem or a training problem. This is an architectural boundary that is just formed around the IDP. And so we've been living inside that boundary. And when I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. From my perspective, the only way to sort of fix that was to focus on that sensor in the browser. Anyway, what made this even more compelling is I had to rip nothing out. The identity solution I had built, it could stay in place. The tool enhanced its capabilities and actually made it better, and I was able to bring the perimeter to the IDP via the tool I'd adopted. So, I'm going to make this quick. I have 4 things that you guys need to do this week. Okay? Go to a vendor portal and pull the login data from that portal. Okay? So this is your vendor. You're going to pull login data from your environment into that portal. You're going to see who's logging in from your environment. Okay? Second, you're going to go to a function in your environment, and you're going to ask them what they log into. And the purpose of that is to figure out, are there shared accounts in your environment? Third, you're going to go pull the last 5 offboardings and audit them. Figure out what applications those people were logging into. Not what they were doing through the IDP. What applications were they actually logging into? And then fourth, you're going to figure out what applications your environment, your users are actually logging into in the last 30 days. I said 90, but really 30 days. Look at 30 days of data to figure out what people are actually logging into. I think that's pretty much my time. Each and every one of you got a boarding card at the beginning of this chat. It's a scratch card. Please scratch it. We have swag at the booth. It's pretty cool. And you know what? I could probably do better justice with my team at the booth to the tool of Unixi. Thank you.